Good evening and welcome to this telecast of Just the News. I'm Faye. There was a lot of action in our courts today, specifically to do with the handling of COVID. Let's get straight to it. Taking you first to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court asked the central government to supply the complete data of the government's purchase history of all vaccines till date. It has asked the central government to furnish data on its plan to vaccinate the remaining population as well. So the court has asked the government to provide three chunks of data. First of all procurement orders placed by the central government for all three vaccines, so Covishield, Covaxin and Sputnik 5, the quantity of vaccines ordered from each supplier till date, and the projected date of supply. The order was passed by the benches of Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, L. Nageshwar Rao and S. Ravindra Bhatt. The court asked the government to provide data on the number of people who've been vaccinated with one or both doses so far, specifically to do with those who are eligible under the first three phases of the vaccination drive. It also asked for a split of those vaccinated between rural and urban India. The court has sought information on the steps taken by the government to ensure availability as well of the drugs used to treat mucormycosis or black fungus. All details will have to be filed in an affidavit by the government in the next 2 weeks. The court also today questioned the government's vaccination policy and the use of the CoWIN portal, which according to the Supreme Court will not be able to achieve universal immunization because of the digital gap, because of so many people who are either illiterate or digitally illiterate and don't know how to use the website. The bench asked the government to clarify how feasible its plan is to get people who have no access to the internet to rely on their friends or on NGOs in order to register themselves for a vaccine. The court also questioned the accessibility and the user interface of that website, which basically makes vaccines inaccessible to disabled people and visually challenged citizens. The government has to respond in the next 2 weeks. A quick note, of course, a lot of this information is information that citizens and activists and lawyers have been interested in so far. So when the government furnishes this information to the Supreme Court, it will become accessible to all of us and we'll understand what kind of orders have been placed by the government for vaccine supply since the very beginning. As cases of black fungus or mucormycosis have been increasing across the country, there's now a shortage of the drug that's used to treat black fungus called amphotericin B. Now, the Delhi High Court has directed the central government to formulate a policy on the distribution of this drug to patients. The bench had said that if all can't be treated, which would be the ideal situation, it falls on the Union of India to spell out its policy on priority for patients so that at least some lives can be saved, if not all. Despite best efforts, the availability of the drug in the country remains acutely short. The Delhi High Court also said that it's a duty of the government to lay down the way forward to save the future of the country, which is the younger population. The court observed that ideally we should be able to save everyone, but if we have to choose, we should save younger people. We need to protect the future, the youth. The court has directed the Indian Council for Medical Research to come out with clear guidelines on the use of black fungus drugs, and the next hearing in this case will be next Friday. In the meantime, the Union Health Ministry has put out data that said India recorded 1.32 lakh COVID cases in the last 24 hours and 3,207 deaths. I just want to remind our viewers that while this number is lower than the 4,000 deaths we were recording every day not long ago, 3,200 people dying in a day is still a shockingly large number, and we must keep that in mind. In other news, Hyderabad-based Biological E has announced that it has entered into a licensing agreement with Canada's Providence Therapeutic Holdings to manufacture its mRNA COVID vaccine in India. Biological E has collaborated also with Johnson & Johnson and produced 600 million doses of their COVID vaccine. The Hyderabad-based firm will also run a clinical trial for Providence's vaccine in India and seek emergency approval for it as well. Providence aims to sell 30 million doses to Biological E and also provide necessary technology. It has a minimum production capacity of 600 million doses in 2022 and a target capacity of 1 billion doses at some point in the future. The Bombay High Court has directed the Maharashtra government to ensure security to Serum Institute of India CEO Adar Poonawalla. This comes after alleged threats that Mr. Poonawalla received over the supply of Covishield vaccine manufactured by his company in India. The Union government has already given him Y category security, but this petition was filed by a lawyer called Datta Mane, who told the High Court that as per news reports, Mr. Poonawalla has been living in fear due to constant pressure from politicians and some others demanding that he provide supply of Covishield vaccine to their respective states. The vacation bench of the Bombay High Court of Justices S.S. Shinde and Abhay Ahuja said by manufacturing the COVID vaccine, Poonawalla is doing a great service to the nation, and the state government's highest functionaries must look into this issue of his security. The bench also said that the state's top officials must personally speak to Mr. Poonawalla, who recently went to London, and assure him of his safety upon his return to India. A doctor in a COVID facility in Assam, about 140 kilometers from Guwahati, was mercilessly beaten up by enraged family members after one patient died of COVID. The doctor was punched and kicked and beaten with a metal trash can and bricks by the relatives of a COVID patient who had died. The video clip of this horrific violence has now gone viral on social media. 24 people, including the main accused, have now been arrested. The incident took place on Tuesday afternoon at the Udhali Model Hospital, where Dr. Swaj Kumar Senapati was on duty. Now, an angered mob of relatives actually attacked the hospital after the COVID patient died. Most medical officers managed to escape and ran away, but Dr. Senapati had locked himself into a room. The mob broke the lock, entered the room and assaulted him. He had to be shifted to another hospital because he was severely injured. Following that incident of that doctor being beaten up in Assam, the Indian Medical Association has written to the Union Home Minister Amit Shah and requested him to approve a law against violence against healthcare workers. In the letter, the IMA wrote, and I quote, "India needs a comprehensive, uniform and effective law against healthcare violence. We request you to approve an effective, strong act against healthcare violence. The real size of the problem is largely unknown, and the recent information shows that current knowledge is only the tip of the iceberg." End quote. The letter also said the incidence of healthcare violence is increased over the years and have become widespread, and the dreaded entity poses to be a threat to medical practice. Of course, this comes at a time when doctors across the country have been working non-stop for the last 1 year, fighting COVID, wearing PPEs and putting their own lives and the lives of their family members at risk. It also should be noted at this point that when there are people who question allopathic drugs, question the efficacy of allopathic drugs, and question the efficacy of allopathic doctors, it drives more and more the trust deficit between patients and doctors, and could result in more of these incidents where doctors are beaten up by angry family members. In other news away from COVID, American technology giant Google today contended that India's IT rules for social media do not apply to it because it is not a social media intermediary. Google has now moved to the Delhi High Court seeking interim protection. Now, Google was appealing against a previous judgment by the Delhi High Court passed by a single judge. This had to do with a case where the photographs of a woman were posted onto a pornographic website without her consent. Now, the court had asked for these photographs to be removed from that particular website, but it was impossible to remove them from the entire internet because the unknown the unknown persons who had posted these photographs kept reposting them in different places and redirecting people to those places. So the court then passed additional directions to the search engine, in this case Google, to disable access to the offending content by de-indexing and dereferencing it from their listed search results. And the court in that order considered Google to be an intermediary. The court said, as an intermediary, it must endeavor to employ proactive monitoring using automated tools to identify, remove and disable access to content that is exactly identical to the offending content, which is the subject matter of the court order. So the court said, because we've asked for this content to be removed, anything identical to this content should be de-indexed by Google so nobody can find it. Google noted that although it is an intermediary, the Delhi High Court judge had mischaracterized it as a social media intermediary or a significant social media intermediary, and because of that it now comes under the new IT rules for social media. Google has now asked for interim protection against any coercive action that might be taken against it because of this categorization. The division bench of Chief Justice D.N. Patel and Justice Jyoti Singh have asked for a response from the central government on this matter. Of course, there are big questions about the government's IT rules on social media, OTT and digital news, because we've got WhatsApp that has gone to court saying it cannot break the end-to-end encryption. We've got Twitter that has put out statements saying that the government is infringing on the right to privacy and the right to freedom of speech and expression. And now Google that has also gone to court saying it does not and should not be categorized as a social media intermediary. Following the central government's decision and the CBSE board's decision to cancel 12 standard examinations, now we have state governments cancelling examinations as well. Haryana and Maharashtra were the first to do so. They will cancel their examinations. Haryana's education minister has confirmed that the state board will take all of the necessary steps and share the details soon regarding the marking scheme and the results. Quick look at news coming in from the world of business and economics. You remember yesterday we brought you a story that said the Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy had said that 10 million jobs were lost in the month of May. The CMI has now revised that data upwards and said it's 15 million jobs or 1.5 crore jobs that have been lost in India in the month of May alone. Now, if you add up the jobs, according to CMI, that were lost in April, which was 7.7 million, that takes us to a grand total of 22 million jobs lost in the months of April and May during the second wave of COVID. This is just as bad as the number we saw in May last year. Now, CMI also tells us that most of these jobs belonged to the informal sector and daily wage sector, which means people who need to move, so plumbers, electricians, who need to work every day in order to earn their money. These are the people who have suffered the most because of lockdowns that we've seen across the country. Also, many small businesses have closed down as well. Mahesh Vyas, the CEO of the CMIE, has said that there are 400 million people employed in India, out of which 22 million people lost their jobs in just 2 months. We have a detailed interview with Mahesh Vyas that has just been uploaded onto our YouTube channel. Do take a look at it. It's very detailed into the problem of jobs. Taking a look now at news coming in from across the world. The WHO has now approved China's Sinovac COVID vaccine for emergency use, making it the second Chinese-made vaccine to receive authorization from the WHO after Sinopharm. Now, the approval allows the vaccine to be used as part of the COVAX program, which is the UN's program that aims to provide vaccinations to poorer countries. According to the WHO, the vaccine efficacy shows results that prevent symptomatic disease in 51% of those vaccinated and 100% prevention of severe COVID and hospitalization in the studied population. Several countries, including Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, and Thailand, are already using Sinovac. News coming in from the world of sports right now. According to the International Cricket Council, or the ICC, the T20 Men's World Cup will be held in the United Arab Emirates. It will be moved out of India to the UAE. The final decision on the location for matches, which are scheduled in October, November this year, will be taken later this month. The ICC, though, has confirmed that irrespective of the location, the BCCI will retain hosting rights of the event. Now, this comes after the BCCI had announced that the remaining matches of the IPL for this year will be finished in UAE in September, October, and of course there was a question of it clashing with the schedules of various international players who would have to play the T20 World Cup. Now that the T20 World Cup is also in October, November in the UAE, it makes that problem rather easy to solve. And one piece of positive news before we leave you for the day. A third year mechanical engineering student from SRM University in Andhra Pradesh called Mohan Aditya has been granted a copyright patent for his innovation of a biodegradable face shield. Now, the face shield not only protects the wearer from COVID viruses, it also protects the environment and will only cost 15 rupees. He's named the Face Shield 2.0 and filed a copyright in May last year. Speaking to India Today, he said there is an increasingly environmental problem. We should move to more eco-friendly alternatives to develop products and services. Therefore, I thought that developing face shields from reusable plastic and cardboard, which is easily downgradable. That brings us to the end of the news today. Remember, details on the stories that we've just read out to you are in the description of our YouTube video. Do remember to subscribe to our YouTube video and watch the interviews that we upload to help us all understand what's going on in these stories a little deeper. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.